from claiming benefits, and you say no.
Well, my concern is that when I was Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, David Cameron and I worked to try and limit the access to benefits even while we were in the EU, and we just couldn't get it done. And so the big pull factor for many people coming to do low-income jobs is the fact that they can then claim top-up benefits, including, by the way, if they don't even accompanied by their families, they get their families to come. And that figure in the last year, 2016, was £4.7 billion spent on EU migrants, mostly accession countries, East European countries. That's a huge top-up to what could then be very cheap salaries. So the question is, that has to end. If that ends, then companies who want them over here have to pay a living wage.
And Mrs May has been very clear that it will end.
Paragraph 89 of the Chequers White Paper is very clear. It says that they would only need to make contributions once, i.e. in their own country. So if you're coming from Romania or Poland or somewhere, where you make very small contributions, if any at all, you'd then be able to come over to the UK under that caveat and claim all the benefits, including family benefits, tax credit, well now, universal credit.
And let's just be clear, because a huge part of the thinking behind ending freedom of movement was to stop EU nationals coming here being able to claim benefits. You're saying under Mrs May's Chequers deal, actually, freedom of movement and being able to claim benefits is not going to end.
I've just published a full migration plan, and in it I'm very clear about this, that if you don't end the access to benefits, you have not controlled migration. Because no matter what I call the smoke and mirrors around freedom of movement, the key element that brings people over for low-paid jobs, and that's the big number, by the way, not the high-skilled jobs who, by and large, contribute through taxation. The low-skilled jobs are basically net recipients of benefits. And if you don't end that, what you have is a massive pull factor for people to come here, often live in really squalid conditions, and then compete with UK workers who have other costs as well. And that's not really fair when you think British taxpayers are subsidising them to compete with British workers.
Okay, let's talk about the business view. Many businesses involved in sectors like the care sector, hospitality, construction, deeply anxious that the drawbridge is going to be pulled up on low-skilled workers, which they are absolutely dependent upon for their business.
Britain has become a cheap labour capital. Most countries in Europe, the developed countries, look at Britain and laugh because they say you're completely dependent on cheap labour. You haven't invested in automation. If you look at the figures for investment by companies now in automation, training, reskilling, and also technology, they are some of the worst in the European Union, ironically. It's because they have got by year by year by year by bringing in cheap labour. But we're losing out because automation, skilling, makes us much more competitive, and we haven't been doing it. I'll give you a figure here, which is the killer. Only 15% of all those who start work in the UK at entry-level jobs will ever move on beyond entry-level. That's an indictment of cheap labour. We don't train people, they don't get reskilled. One of the reasons why salaries pay hasn't been rising.
If you're running a care home, what happens then post-Brexit? Suddenly, you're no longer able to recruit from abroad, and your business model, your care home, is in jeopardy.
We've got to look very carefully at what happens, for example, in the care sector. You know, other countries have now invested massively in technology, which improves the quality of the care, but reduces the number of people delivering the care. So they monitor people in their own homes, they know where they are. We are very bad in this country at doing that because they've been able to get cheap labour and just make no decisions on it. So the big change in social care has got to be massive investment in new technology, which will hugely improve that. And that, by the way, will mean people will pay more money to do the job rather than just cheap pay. And that's really important because it's no life if you're running to do a 15-minute visit, you know, in your car, getting next to nothing at all. That's not a life. What we want is people paid properly for their skills.
Okay, let's talk about the impact on, I suppose, probably our children. If we want our children to go and work as a barman in Paris or an English language teacher in Seville or whatever, they can do that, no problems, no questions asked. Under this, that will no longer be possible. There'll be some sort of visa restrictions on their ability to do that. So bringing an end to freedom of movement has a fairly significant repercussion for people here.
I don't think the repercussions are that great. British workforce, by and large, doesn't go and do cheap labour in Europe. It's not the same at all. By and large, most British people working in Europe are doing much higher skilled work, for which they get a higher salary. They're not reliant on that sort of stuff. And you'll find that process of higher skilled work is a much more flexible process, and it will be afterwards with the visa, because they're small in number and they by and large contribute in taxation. My own sister moved out to Italy to work before we joined the EU, and she was very
complicated.
It was a little more complicated than it is now, but she's lived and worked all her life there. Had two sisters who worked out there. There are plenty of people that work there. You just make the process flexible and smooth. But what you cannot do, the big problem for the UK has not been high-priced labour coming and bringing skills. That's small in number. The big pressure on communities and schools has been low-paid work that has been very cheap end, and which the British taxpayers have had to subsidise European workers to come and do, and that's quite wrong.
One of the big claims by Brexiteers such as yourself is that after Brexit we'll be able to present ourselves as an outward-looking global Britain. Let me suggest to you that the message sent out from this sort of tighter immigration regime is actually, no, we're not that fond of all you people coming here, we're going to make it much more difficult. In other words, it undermines the whole basis of global Britain.
I don't think it does, because every country in the world has controlled migration. Australia is a global nation, America is a global nation. You know, we have controlled migration. Try getting into Europe from outside Europe, that's very controlled. My point is, we need controlled migration. One of the big problems was in the open doors to the new accession countries who have much lower GDP, that number has put huge pressure. I mean, we've taken in over 3 million people. There's never been an influx like this in British history, and that has caused problems. It's not anti-migration, this is for controlled migration, and that is a sensible and reasonable way to work it. And you do your free trade deals and you allow flexibility in those, but by and large you control the migration levels every year through a cap process.
Isn't there a case for saying that actually all this is completely missing the point? That the real concern for many voters actually is non-EU migration because of issues around assimilation and acceptance of British society and British culture. And yet there, the British government has long had the ability to set its own rules, to implement different controls, and failed spectacularly. Actually, non-EU migration is now going up pretty rapidly.
Yeah, it's because a lot of the skills that are necessary to do things like health services, they are really required outside, because English language is spoken as almost a first language in many of the Commonwealth countries. But I think the whole control of migration, once you start with the EU, then you bring the migration levels properly under control. What you have is a patchy kind of migration process right now. So bringing us all into the same migration process allows us to offer the caps that are necessary on certain levels of pay, and allow some of the higher skilled people to come in. And so it's in fact not finding against people outside the European Union, but in favour of what is called skilled search, not high-level but low-skilled migration.
Okay, Ian Douglas, thanks very much for your time, Vic. It's going to be the big issue of the day, very obviously. Part of the reason I suspect why we're getting it today is to make sure one Boris Johnson running through his field of wheat does not dominate today's coverage when he arrives in a couple of hours' time.
Thanks, Norman. And thank you to Ian Duncan-Smith. Let's talk now more about migration with George Freeman. He's a Conservative MP. He's former head of the Prime Minister's Policy Board, where they come up with ideas and new policies. Sunder Katwala is here of British Future, a think tank which is interested in immigration. They're both in Birmingham at the Tory Party conference. Alongside me in the studio is immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bhangal, and in Dover, on her way to Calais, is Sabina Voigt. She is one of our Brexit bunch, a group of people this programme is following over the next few months and years to see how Brexit will affect them. She is actually, at this very moment, on a ferry, leaving the UK for good, moving back to Germany after almost 20 years living here. Sabina, let's start with you then. Just remind our audience why you're leaving.
Hello, Victoria. Thank you for having me. Well, I think, as I said when I came onto the programme the other week, we feel so unwelcome now in the UK as an EU citizen. And the country has changed beyond belief, which I never thought was possible. And so we've decided to pack up and go. We also need to secure our rights and interests on the continent. Because it all looks like now like a cliff edge, no deal Brexit, a hard Brexit.
But let me ask you how you are feeling as you're on the boat heading over to Calais on the day that the Prime Minister is announcing that freedom of movement will end.
I'm saddened. I am absolutely saddened about that. Well, because the opportunities that I had when I came to Britain in 1999, I would never have chosen to come to Britain if I wouldn't have had the freedom of movement. It's like moving from Manchester to Liverpool, and of course I had to polish up on my English and that kind of thing. But it's kind of So I am very saddened for Britain. I feel very sad for my friends and other EU citizens who are in the country, as well as the British in Europe, because they are affected as well from that.
Okay. George Freeman, how do you respond to hearing that EU citizen leaving the UK after 17 years because of Brexit?
Well, I'm very sorry to hear that she's leaving, and I'd just say you don't have to, because we've made very clear that all EU citizens here, all your rights are protected. You're a British citizen to all intents and purposes. Now the rights that you've enjoyed are secure. The Prime Minister's made that clear. So you don't have to leave for that reason. But I hugely understand the fear that Brexit may feel to European citizens living in Britain as the beginning of a moment where we become culturally less European and we become more nationalistic, and that would be a huge shame. So I think it's very important that we signal that as we take control of our borders and we take control of our immigration system, that we are not doing it in a spirit of hostility to people who want to come and contribute to our country. And I think that's what Sajid Javid will be making very clear this afternoon. So my message would be, please get off the ferry. Your rights are secure, and wait for Sajid's speech this afternoon.
Okay, well,
can I come in?
Yeah, go on, Sabina, yeah.
Well, you know what, I've had no guarantees. I don't know, I didn't check today, but probably 829 days in limbo or so. I wasn't, I don't know if I can still take my dogs over to the continent come the 29th of March. I don't know if my driving licence is still valid on the continent. Those kind of things which are incredibly important. And you know what, I feel much more protected by EU 27 than the British government.
Okay, I want to bring in Sunder, if I may, Sunder Katwala, because his organisation, British Future, has just finished interviewing 20,000 people around the country on what they want from a future immigration system, what they think about immigration right now. And I wonder, Sunder, what the majority say when it comes to rules in the future.
Well, I think people do see Brexit as a reset moment, a chance to strike the right balances, a chance to rebuild public confidence. It was absolutely unanimous. We went to 60 towns and cities to hold these events. It was absolutely unanimous that the people who are already here must be protected, and people didn't think that was a question at all. So while everyone will make their personal choices, we've clearly got a lot of work to do to make sure people can feel fully part of our society. But then people are expecting changes, and they want those changes to be pragmatic, constructive, and to strike the balance between the pressures of immigration when it's high and the gains that people know that immigration brings to this country. I think hopefully we've got a Home Secretary today who will strike those balances, because he's got a very important job of being the person who's got to redesign an immigration and integration system that can make us feel confident and I hope proud of the contribution that immigration can make to Britain when we manage it well.
Your research has found the public is particularly worried about migrants coming to the country just to claim benefits. I want to ask you and George Freeman, would a ban on all benefits for EU migrants until they've worked in Britain for 5 years, like Ian Duncan Smith was suggesting, address those fears?
Well, I believe that I agree with I think we need to make sure we get this right, that it's balanced and pragmatic. For me, access to the single market so that we can trade and our businesses can create jobs is absolutely key. And for me, I think a very powerful reform would be to say, look, if people are coming here to work, we understand that and we want you and we'll give you a visa. But the entitlements of citizenship, the entitlements to welfare need to be earned. And I think my constituents who voted for Brexit would welcome that. A new contract, come and work and you'll earn your right to full benefits, but you don't get them on day one. My constituents voted against a system that allows people to send their benefit payments back to Eastern Europe. And I think what Sajid Javid today is trying to signal is he's heard them, he's understood, we'll be giving visas to everybody that we need. This is not Britain pulling up the drawbridge, but we are making sure that we're signalling we've heard the grievances. People are worried that by remaining in the EU, their border is in the Mediterranean, Their border isn't policed properly. They want us to be able to police an intelligent border, an open border, but controlled by us.
And I think people take a very nuanced view about what's fair to migrants and what's fair to the communities they join. They don't think you should be able to send child benefit to Poland, but they do think you should be able to bring your child from Poland and be in a British school. They think it should take time to get social housing or out of work benefits, but I don't think they think that two people working the same shift should be being paid different amounts. So fairness to migrants, fairness to the communities they join, actually there's a lot more common ground between what migrants themselves feel. It's important people speak the language, it's important people come to work and contribute, and the British public. So when you have the debate, you actually unlock a common ground that's missing, I think, when you debate this on the internet, and it's the people with the very strongest views who are just shouting.
Let me bring in Harjap back. No, hang on. I need to bring in Harjap Bhangal. He's been sitting really patiently listening to you talk. He's an immigration lawyer. I mean, you just heard George Freeman say, we'll be giving visas to everyone who needs one. Do you think there is a gamble here, though?
Not everyone who needs one, everyone who the country thinks they want to allow in. And I think what this announcement is, it's aimed at highly skilled people. It's clearly an end to low-skilled immigration coming here. We clearly feel we've got enough. And the onus, I think, is now being put onto the British public as to, right, well, these low-skilled jobs, you've got to go out and fill them. They're there for you. They've always been around for the last 20, 30 years. We're doing what you wanted and ending low-skilled immigration and freedom of movement. So go out there and fill them.
Well, there's also an onus, presumably, on employers to potentially pay more if they want those jobs filled by British workers.
I think
they've taken advantage, perhaps, of EU migrants.
I think that's also a great point. And the fact is now employers, especially small businesses who are in the catering industry, restaurants, hotels, social care homes, where there's huge vacancies, will now have to start paying, and will now have to recognise that why aren't they attracting the UK workers? Why are people thinking we don't want to fill these jobs? We're going to let the EU citizens fill these jobs. So I think that the onus is on them. And small businesses will be up in arms today. Let's face it, they will be up in arms and saying, well, hold on, you know, you're going to hit our profits, you're going to hit our workforce. The care sector needs about 90,000 workers. I mean, so in that respect, they will be up in arms. But now the onus, once again, we're going to hear this a lot in the media, will be to train the British public up to fill these posts that have been vacant for a long time.
Briefly, you've said that you would prefer unskilled migrants to be able to come here in big numbers, but just to work, not to be able to bring their families.
The system in Dubai, which I go out to and I see, it's very simple. You go out there, you work, you can't bring your family, you'll never get permanent. But you can earn as much as you want, work as much as you want, send your money home.
Irrespective of what your skills are?
Irrespective of what your skills are, as long as you have employment.
And
you can't claim benefits.
Does it
Seems to be working fine. I mean, so what we could say is, you can come here, as long as you've got a job, you can work, you can send money back, you won't be allowed to call your families over. Once you've finished your work for 5, 10 years, you can go back and rejoin your families. A lot of low-skilled migrants actually don't want their kids to be schooled here. And the migrants traditionally have sent money back and got the best schools back home, say in India or Pakistan back home. There's also another problem. What about the people already here? 1.5 million illegal people already here who are not allowed to work, who we're chasing and trying to put on planes back home. And they've been here 10, 12 years. They're already part of a workforce, working underground without any IDs or on fake IDs. Shouldn't we do something about them? We just ignore that ghost community. We need to bring them into the system. Why not prefer them and say, well, you're already working, we'll give you yearly visas, we'll renew them, but you won't get permanent residency.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all of you. Thanks for your time. Thank you. I wish we could have had more time. Sabina, we'll talk again once you get to Germany, no doubt.
Can I do one more? I feel
You'll have to be so quick, Sabina. Go ahead.
I feel like a commodity when I listen to what people are saying, and I feel really, really sorry for Britain. So yes, we'll speak again. Thank you so much for having me.
Safe journey. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.